Meanwhile, a new World Food Programme report shows that access to food is grossly unequal, and COVID-19 has just been added to these challenges. A basic meal is far beyond the reach of millions of people in 2020 as the COVID-19 pandemic joins conflict, climate change and economic troubles in pushing up levels of hunger around the world. To speak more about this is Gerald Bourke, who is Regional Communications Officer for Southern Africa UN World Food Organization, the Nobel Peace Prize laureate. A very good evening to you, and thank you so much for speaking to us.
Thank you for having me. Good to be here.
So let's talk about the salient points, the main thrust of your Cost of a Plate Food 2020 report.
Yeah, I mean, as you mentioned, there are huge challenges which are aggravating food insecurity and hunger around the world. Climate change is a big one. It's particularly big in this part of the world. It is getting worse. Conflict, of course, is another major contributing factor. We know that Eastern DRC has suffered decades of conflict, and a more recent conflict has erupted in northern Mozambique. There's also economic turmoil, pre-COVID, of course, but also aggravated by COVID. The World Food Programme for this region is now projecting that as many as 52 million people will need food assistance in the 12 countries in the region where we operate. That's nearly double the 27 million we projected pre-COVID. So huge problems, huge challenges, and unfortunately getting worse.
And we'll look into some of them in a little more detail, but which of those countries that you've mentioned tops the list of where access is most difficult?
Well, in terms of the cost of a plate of food, the report you just mentioned, South Sudan comes at the top. But 5 southern African countries come within the top 10. So Malawi, for example, Mozambique, Zimbabwe, DRC, Republic of Congo, among them. So it hurts big time in this region too, as you and your viewers are aware.
And you mentioned in the report that if we're talking about a plate of food, the most basic being that of rice and beans, for instance, the report says 180%, that is the cost of just a basic ingredients on a person's daily income. Is that correct?
That's correct. So, yes, exactly. It's measured against earnings in a particular day. So I think it's close to 300%. The cost of a meal, as you say, very simple rice and beans, is 300% of the daily earnings of somebody in South Sudan. In this region, it runs from 20% to 30%. So very, very prohibitive when you have to feed a family, a large family, and of course you have other expenditures to worry about.
Why is it that 17 of the top 20 countries featured in the index are in sub-Saharan Africa? What is the main reason?
Well, again, for those reasons that I mentioned, there are far too many wars in Africa. Climate change is a huge problem, particularly in this region, and getting worse. We know that, for example, that there has been only one normal growing season, one normal rainy season in southern Africa in the last 5 years. The scientists are telling us that the negative impacts of climate change, the droughts, the cyclones are going to become more frequent and more severe. They also tell us, for example, that maize accounts for 70% of this region's cereal production. And yet we are told by the scientists that 40% of the land currently under maize will be unusable for the purpose in as little as 10 years because it will be too hot and too dry. So conflict, climate change, economic turmoil, and of course now COVID.
How many lives and livelihoods are under severe threat in this year, in 2020 alone? And talk to us also about whether or not it is conducive for you to do the work that you can, especially in a conflict-ridden situation. Are you able to reach the most vulnerable?
Yeah, maybe I'll take the second question first. Indeed, humanitarian access is a huge problem in a war zone. Again, thinking of Eastern DRC, for example, very problematic for the World Food Programme and its partners. So that disrupts distributions oftentimes for long periods and in significant ways. Same in northern Mozambique, Cabo Delgado. The insurgency there has generated more than 300,000 internally displaced people who are on the move. And it's very hard to help people who are on the move. So yes, move. So access is a major problem.
All right, thank you so much for speaking to us, Gerald Bourke, Regional Communications Officer for Southern Africa, UN World Food Organization. That's the Nobel Peace Prize laureate.